I tried dipping my macarons in royal icing for the first time, and oh my gosh, you guys, it was so much fun, and the end result was just so stunning and gorgeous. Everyone I shared these macs with loved them, and I just needed to share this entire process with you. So in order to dip the macaron shells, obviously we need macaron shells. So I'm gonna go in. I recently got into these Master Elite colors by Sugar Art, and I am just going to make my regular French method meringue macaron shells, which means room temperature egg whites, pouring in some sugar until I reach a stiff peak. I will be adding in the powdered food coloring at the same point when I add in all of the rest of my colors, just like usual. I'm going to be adding a mix of violet and burgundy, as I want kind of a Valentine's Day-esque vibe going for these macs today. So I'm just going to add in those powdered colors, continue whipping my meringue until it gets to that really stiff peak, and then I will move on to incorporating my dry ingredients. My almond flour and powdered sugar mixed together here. It is definitely recommended to process that in the food processor and then sift it just to make sure you don't have any lumps, but I am often too lazy to do that, and I have such a tiny food processor that it takes such a long time, so I do the best I can to mix those dry ingredients together before I incorporate them into my meringue and finish that macaronage process. If you find that your shells are looking lumpy or rough, just know that that may indicate that your almond flour is not processed enough, or your powdered sugar is a little bit too clumpy. That is definitely a really high possibility, but also it doesn't affect the taste at all as long as you are really mixing everything and incorporating everything together at this stage, and finishing that macaronage process correctly. So don't worry too much, but if it is something that's bothering you, definitely go back to the drawing board there and see maybe that might be something that is coming up for you. I'm just going to add in all of my dry ingredients here and then continue folding and mixing until I've reached that ribbon stage, which means the batter will flow off of my spatula like a ribbon and back into the bowl. We don't want it to be too stiff. We also don't want this to be too liquid. It will affect the end result. You might have what people refer to as hollows or big gaps inside the shells. Even after they're matured, you might end up with your shells spreading and running in a way you don't want them to, or they might be way too stiff and holding tracks even as you pipe them. So again, that is why we're looking for this ribbon stage here. As soon as I get to that ribbon stage, I'll put my macaron batter into my piping bag and just pipe regular old circles, tapping my trays and then letting them rest on my counter until that skin has formed on the outside of my macs before popping them into my oven. Depending on where you live, what your oven is like, what the humidity level is, all different kinds of variables might affect how long you rest your macs, how long you bake your macs, and what temperature you might want to use. So while I usually rest my macs for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then I bake them for about 15 to 17 minutes at 300 degrees Fahrenheit, that might be very different for you, so take that with a grain of salt. my macs are baked, matched, and cooled, I can finally get into the fun part of this video. I just whipped up some royal icing using a just meringue powder mix, some water and powdered sugar, and I colored some of the royal icing in 3 different colors, trying to stay true to the colors I chose for my macarons. I'm using a really shallow dish here, and I just put the white royal icing in the base of that, and I'm gonna go through and just zigzag in those 3 colors that I chose so that the colors are kind of overlapping but not, you know, really intensely touching and everywhere. The reason this is because I want to continuously use the same dish, so I'm going to start off with not too much color because I will keep adding color as I dip my macarons. So I will just really quickly use a toothpick, or you could use a scribe tool to create some additional swirls and zigzags through that royal icing before I dip my first mac. When it is time to dip your macaron shells, I'm just going to take one of my macaron shells, turn it upside down, and go straight down, pressing into the royal icing just enough until it reaches kind of where the foot of the macaron starts. I'm going to pull it straight up and try to shake off a lot of the excess before turning over the macaron using kind of a swirling motion so that the point of royal icing that was still falling ends up not getting weird or dripping off of the macaron shell. My royal icing is thick enough that it won't drip and go everywhere, but it also has to be thin enough that I don't have the peak staying there. So if I just shake my macaron shell a little bit, it will disappear and you will be left with a really smooth, glossy shell. I'm going to continue dipping macaron shells into the same little plate of royal icing, and as soon as I pick up most of the color that we see there, I will go through and drizzle in more color with my 3 other shades. Depending on your color scheme, you absolutely could start off with a base that is not white, but if you want to have a bunch of different vibrant colors on top of that, I think something white or a relatively pale or neutral color is a really great place to start. And because the more you pick up icing with your macaron shell, the more the colors will kind of swirl and slide together. You end up with some blended colors and some indistinct colors, and it doesn't look like I purely only used 3 colors. It just kind of creates this really beautiful marble effect. So I would also say, unless you have a specific color scheme to use, 6 or 10 different colors, I would say stick with 2 to 4 colors. I'm just going to let those dry at room temperature completely before filling my macarons. And this is because I don't want to smudge or smush the royal icing as I am piping the filling or as I'm sandwiching the macarons, and I also don't want it wet when I put it into the refrigerator to mature overnight. I just have a caramel buttercream and caramel filling here that I'm going to add. If you want to see how I create some of my other fillings, definitely check out some of the other videos. I've made this caramel a couple times. It is phenomenal and one of my favorite flavors. I found that these macarons matured very normally, even with that entire covering of royal icing, though because of that extra layer and it can be a little bit firm, you might want to give it not just a day, but maybe a day and a half of maturing before you bite into it, just to make sure you've really achieved that soft but still a little bit of a crunch for your final texture. If you eat it right away, you will definitely have an additional crunch added to your macaron. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this macaron tutorial, and stay tuned for all of my other Valentine's Day themed tutorials this year. I'm really excited. I have a bunch of fun things to share with you. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so. I'd love to see you here again next time. Until then, have a wonderful day. Bye.